The movie opens with actress Mila Jovovich addressing the audience, assuring them that the film is based on a true story that happened to real people in the town of Nome, Alaska in the year 2000. However, fearing for the safety of those involved, the filmmakers changed the names of the characters, even though each event is backed by video evidence. Still, whether to believe in what happened or not is left for the viewers to decide. In 2002, Chapman University conducts a televised interview with psychologist Dr. Abigail "Abby" Tyler. She recounts a story of a family tragedy involving her husband. 2 years earlier, in August 2000, Abby's husband Will was mysteriously killed in his sleep during the night, leaving her with 2 children, her daughter Ashley and her teenage son Ronnie. Unable to cope with the grief, Abby turns to her colleague Dr. Abel Campos, a psychologist from Anchorage, for help. He tries to uncover what exactly the woman remembers from that terrible night, but she can't describe the person who killed her husband. Abel records a hypnosis session with Abby, during which she recalls the attack happening suddenly at night while they were in bed. Something woke her up, and she saw a tall, dark figure standing near the bed, and then a knife plunged into her husband's chest. Seeing it again, the woman screams, and Abel is forced to interrupt the session. He advises Abby to take a break and rest, but she believes that will only make things worse. Besides, she needs to complete her research. She returns to Nome, which is only accessible by air, and goes straight to work, where a patient is already waiting for her. The man complains about sleep problems. Every night he wakes up at the same time, disturbed by the image of an owl in his dreams. Hearing this, Abby immediately recalls other patients who also dream of a white owl, an image that somehow terrifies them. Strangely, this bird first appeared to them back in childhood. People were certain their windows were closed, and how the owl got inside remains a mystery. Abby decides to conduct hypnotherapy sessions and schedules appointments for all 3 patients. However, her personal problems weigh on her even more. After her husband's death, their daughter Ashley lost her eyesight. The girl is struggling, especially because her classmates believe she's faking it, which only worsens her condition. Her son Ronnie is also constantly on edge, unable to understand how his mother can help others while being unable to help herself or her own family. He's also trying to get to the truth, not understanding what really happened that night. Abby believes that her son is blaming her for her husband's death. That night, Abby listens to a tape where her husband talks about cases of insomnia in Nome. Ashley hears her father's voice and comes to her mother, distracting Abby from the recording. The next day, Abby hypnotizes 2 patients and both recount similar horrifying stories about creatures trying to break into their homes. The men are so frightened that they try to escape and hide. Abby has to wake them and reassure them that the creatures were just visions, but the patients remain in a state of distress. That same night, Abby is called to the police station because one of her patients is holding his wife and 2 children at gunpoint, demanding that the doctor be brought to him immediately. She arrives at the scene and hears the man saying he must do something terrible because he has no choice. He screams that if others had seen what he had seen, they would understand him. The man asks what Zimabueder means, but no one understands these words. Despite Abby's pleas, the man kills his family and takes his own life. The sheriff interrogates Abby, and she tells him about the owl. But the man doesn't understand what could be frightening about a bird. He accuses Abby of using hypnosis, which he believes led to the tragedy. Abby tries to prove that terrible things are happening in the town, but the sheriff refuses to consider anything supernatural. She reminds him that he still hasn't solved her husband's murder. So what can be said about unexplained phenomena? The sheriff orders her to stop her psychological experiments on people. That night, Abby tries to analyze what happened and remembers the man who died saying that the owl no longer appeared, as if it had been a false memory. The next day, Abel flies in to see her, worried about her condition, and urges her to stop her investigation. But Abby cannot stop, otherwise people will continue to suffer. She agrees to his request to become involved in her work. That day, her second patient, Scott, arrives, and his symptoms completely match the visions of the man who died. Scott's wife is worried and asks Abby to conduct a hypnosis session to determine whether her husband might be in similar danger. Abby and Abel conduct a hypnosis session. Scott says he sees an owl that doesn't look like a normal bird. Under hypnosis, he senses that someone is in his house. He says they've been coming for him since childhood. The man begins to shake violently, and Abby, frightened, ends the session. When he regains composure, the man admits he saw some beings, but he can't describe them. He also hears their voices in his head, though he doesn't remember what they did to him. And it's so terrifying that he now understands why the killer did what he did. The couple leaves. Abby suggests that the patients may have been abducted by aliens. Such cases are reported all over the world daily, with around 11 million registered accounts. However, Abel doesn't believe in it since there's no solid proof. Their conversation is interrupted by Abby's assistant, who had listened to a tape Abby had given her. She says she heard a strange, frightening voice breaking through Abby's own screaming. Abby doesn't remember the incident, and the voice speaks an unknown language. Abel is suspicious, but Abby insists it wasn't her voice. She returns home and replays the recording from that session. She remembers being asleep when the door opened. Someone or something entered the room. Abby doesn't recall how the mark on her shoulder appeared, but now believes that the being was responsible for it. That night she struggled, but the entity was stronger and abducted her. Remembering this, Abby checks the floor and sees scratch marks, confirming her memory of clinging to the boards was real. She tries to focus and make sense of everything, but she can't identify the language on the tape. Abby contacts Dr. Awolowo Odusami, a specialist in ancient languages who had known her late husband, to help determine the origin of the mysterious language spoken during the suspected abductions. Odusami listens to her story and eventually flies to Nome. After listening to the recording, Odusami identifies the language as Ancient Sumerian. He is able to recognize a few words, our creation, to study, and completely destroy. But he can't fully translate the entire phrase spoken by the unknown being. This language is the oldest in human history, and it's strange that it would suddenly resurface in modern times. Odusami is disturbed by what the aliens might have done to Abby, and he points out that the voice on the tape is not human. Abel still refuses to believe these theories. Odusami shares his findings and recommends visiting any Sumerian exhibition where they'd see depictions of rockets flying into the sky and sculptures of figures wearing helmets and suits created long before the pyramids. The book of Genesis, he says, contains content far beyond the understanding of modern people and was written 6,000 years before the Bible. Noah's Ark derives from the Sumerian flood story, and tales of alien visitors are reflected in Sumerian history. He works with facts, even though he doesn't know how it all connects. Their conversation is interrupted by a call from Scott's wife, urgently requesting Abby's presence. Scott confesses that there was no owl and speaks of them, but remembers nothing else. He begs Abby to hypnotize him again so they can uncover the truth. Under hypnosis, Scott suddenly levitates above the bed. A voice speaking through him in Sumerian orders Abby to stop her research. The video feed cuts out, so Abel is unable to record what's happening. The man convulses violently, and Abby, terrified, pulls him out of the trance. She rushes home and tells her children to pack. They are leaving. But just then, the sheriff bursts into the house and reports that Scott has been left paralyzed from the neck down. Believing Abby is responsible, the officer tries to arrest her. Abel steps in to defend Abby and confirms her story. The sheriff places Abby under house arrest. The police leave, assigning one officer to watch the house. In the 2002 interview, Abby explains that there are 4 classified types of contact. The first kind is when a person sees a UFO. The second is when there's physical evidence, like crop circles. The third kind is direct contact with aliens. But the most terrifying is the fourth kind, when a person is abducted, and it happens everywhere. People simply don't remember it because they've been made to forget. The action returns to the year 2000. The remaining officer sits in his car, keeping watch on Abby's house, when a large black triangular object appears in the sky. The video distorts, but the man is heard screaming and calling for backup. Reinforcements soon arrive. The police, led by the sheriff, burst into the house. They find Ronnie and Abby, who is screaming that Ashley was taken through a beam of light. The disbelieving and enraged sheriff accuses Abby of abducting her daughter and removes Ronnie from her custody. Abby then decides to undergo hypnosis herself in an attempt to contact the beings and reunite with her daughter. Abel and Odusami record the session on video. Abby also mentions the owl. Suddenly, she begins to scream. The camera shakes, sounds of violence are heard, and Abby sees some kind of device digging into her shoulder. Then a harsh voice yells that the child will remain with him because he is God. Odusami translates the last phrase as, the spirit from which you cannot escape. The film returns to Abby's interview, in which she explains that all 3 of them were abducted during the hypnosis session, and none of them remembers what happened, but they were returned that same night. Abby admits that she then felt something beyond human comprehension, and that feeling was hopelessness, so it couldn't have been God. After the hypnosis session, Abby wakes up in a hospital, having broken her neck during the abduction. The sheriff arrives and shows her a photo of her late husband, revealing the truth. Will actually shot himself in the head, proving that Abby's belief that he was murdered was merely her way of escaping reality. Abel asks her not to blame herself, reminding her that even the best psychologists can't truly access the human mind. Abby asks Abel to confirm the abduction, but he refuses to do so. In 2002, Abby confesses that even if she processed her husband's death in such a way, there are still recordings that don't lie. Scott's neck is broken, and Ashley still hasn't been found. She believes that one day she will see her daughter again. The broadcast ends and it becomes clear that Abby is now paralyzed due to her neck injury. The host explains that Nome has been visited by the FBI more than 2,000 times, yet no cases were ever officially opened. Dr. Abel remains a practicing psychologist, and Odusami becomes a professor at a university in Canada. Both men, along with the sheriff, refuse to participate in the film. Meanwhile, Abby's son Ronnie, now 22, still blames his mother for his sister's disappearance and rarely sees her. All charges against Abby were dropped, and she moved from Alaska to the East Coast. However, she continues searching for Ashley, though now bedridden. During the credits, numerous audio recordings are played, featuring people recounting their UFO sightings. The film offers a solid atmosphere, capturing the feel of a small town where strange things are happening, and no one can explain or stop them. The acting is strong, and of course, Milla Jovovich's presence is a highlight. The plot is extremely convoluted and hard to follow, and the mockumentary style can be disorienting. But as the film itself says, it's up to the viewer to decide.